Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. So this is something that I have been feeling and I wanted to talk about, or at least touch on a little bit ever since maybe around 1 to 2 years after I started playing Genshin Impact, which is that I noticed that I started actively preferring anime style characters or anime game style characters that were similar or at least more similar to Genshin Impact character design. And this isn't just restricted to Genshin Impact. Then there was Honkai Star Rail, and now it's Zenless Zone Zero. I definitely think that Zenless Zone Zero is probably my most preferred or my favorite character designs, uh, both in the Hoyoverse style of games as well as just like anime style game character design in general. Now, this isn't something that I made like an active decision on. It was just something I started noticing after 1 to 2 years into Genshin Impact, which was that I started looking at other like anime style games, JRPGs, even the Persona games, Tales of Arise, that sort of stuff. And I just thought to myself, these anime games that cost full price have main characters that kind of look like shit compared to Genshin and gacha game characters. And again, this wasn't like some kind of active decision that I made. And this is like I consciously knew that that wasn't totally fair to these games because they're trying to go for a different art style or that they have a different like motive in mind. Obviously, if you're playing Persona 5, a character who is like canonically a high school student isn't going to dress in the same way as like Nekomata or I don't know, somebody who is an adult working in a video game store or like a video rental store in Zenless Zone Zero. So they're not going to go for the same kind of art style. You're going to have a uniform, and then in the dungeons, you're going to have an entirely different style based on like an outfit that is like in some way a reflection of their mentality. So I get that. I get that they have different motives and they have different settings, but needless to say, it was still the case that at some point I thought to myself, holy shit, each of these Genshin style characters, each of these Hoyoverse style characters, they kind of trash on the non-Hoyo style characters. And after a while, I also noticed that other games were starting to copy or at least mimic the Genshin style character design. Whatever you think that might be, for some people that might be a lot of like belt buckles. For some people, it might be like needless amounts of like waistbands or like thigh bands. Yeah, God, there's so many of those in Honkai Star Rail. And those are things that I started to get annoyed at some point, but that's another conversation. So what I'm saying is that at some point, my subconscious started to favor Hoyoverse style character designs. And that's basically what this tweet is talking about. This tweet by NemuPoe is saying MiHoYo has done irreparable damage to the expectation of anime character designs. They go into further detail further down, but you can basically just like reading this first tweet, you basically know what they're trying to get at, right? Because it's not some kind of secret that other games have started to copy Hoyoverse character designs. And I'm not saying that every single Hoyoverse character design is like a triple A SSS rank character design. There are some that are definitely worse than others. There are some that are definitely just trash. I'm not going to get into detail on which ones because for a lot of people that is like a personal choice. For some, one design is good, and for another person, the same design is trash. But they go on to say that adding more insignificant details doesn't make a design better, I promise. I'm fully aware that over-designing anime characters has been a thing since the dawn of time. However, I am just incredibly tired of seeing MiHoYo-style open-world anime game characters because all the character designs seem to replicate MiHoYo's same genre of over-designing lol. My main gripe is companies who make these games keep trying to one-up other designs in terms of elaborateness, which ironically makes every character design look the same, especially when they use really similar art styles. And that is definitely something I have me feeling as well. When I look at Wuthering Waves designs, which a lot of people have been like lionizing as a more mature character design compared to Genshin Impact, it still looks relatively similar. There's still like all those belts. There's still all of these like shoulder sleeves, although not to the same degree or not to the same format, like not to the same homogenization as a game like Honkai Star, which I think is the biggest like perpetrator of this kind of character design because they all have. I feel like Honkai Star has a very limited set of models, even though technically I've counted they have actually more base models compared to Genshin Impact. They only use a very certain few of those. There's like the teenage female model, and then there's like a slightly taller female model, and then they have adult female model. And those are the ones that they use the most. There's also a teenage male model, but I've noticed that they don't use those nearly as much. So it's basically like 3 or 4 models in total that they use. There's like a kid model, which they use like every once in a blue moon. There's technically speaking only 2 of those in the entire game. There's Bailu and there's Hook. I think those are the only 2 kitty models in the entire game. So the amount of like variation that they have is going to be limited just based on the number of character models that they have. And this is the problem that all gacha games have. But even within that limited set of character models, they can still have a great deal of variation. However, even within that set of variation, they all go through the same like character designs. I've noticed that Honkai Star male characters all have the same coats, or they have like a furry like lining to their neck. So they have a very furry neck lining, whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean, like aventurings type of thing. And then they have a coat, they have like some kind of trench coat, and then they wear a suit with like leggings. And that's basically the male character design. Sometimes they have like a chest window. That is probably around 70 to 80% of adult male character designs in Honkai Star. For Genshin characters, it's a bit more varied, but they also have something very similar. They all have the same thigh bands. They all have something in the back where they have like these ribbons or belt buckles that move in the air when you're moving around, and this is just good character design. And that's something that I always go back to. It's just good character design for games to have these character design elements, because they make the characters feel more animated when they move around. That's why they have them. That's why actual anime characters oftentimes don't have those, because they don't have the same considerations. They are not a game. This is what I was talking about when I was viewing that video. If you watch my 50-minute video on, I think it was like an hour and 40 minutes, not even 50 minutes, on the video that somebody else made, I think it was New Frames Plus, who made a video about how Zenless Zone characters were over animated. I do think, and one of the criticisms that I had for that video is that even though they are both animations, even though one has cutscenes and those are animated, and a movie like The Silent Voice also has animation, they are fundamentally different media forms, which means that they have fundamentally different considerations. The fact that a character in an anime is animated doesn't mean that they're going to be the same as a character in a game that is also animated, because they're going to share different aspects. A character in an anime doesn't have to obey the same rules as the character in a game, because a character in a game actually has to be played at some point beyond just the animation. So the character designs that they have will ultimately be different, even though they are very similar. So it's not a one-to-one similarity. And I think that is also part of why characters in games, in gacha games and open world gacha games in particular, have all these belt buckles and all these like different ribbons, because frankly speaking, they do feel better to play as a whole when you actually look at them moving around in the open world. If they're just wearing like a pants, right, and they have absolutely nothing going on in their back, then they just look less interesting. You don't want to believe that's true, but it is true. I'm pretty sure they have done testing on this at MiHoYo at some point. And they realize that, yes, characters that have things flowing from their backs do look better than characters that don't, because you're going to be looking at their back 99% of the time when you're playing a video game. So they do make it a goal to have certain character designs. And there was also an interview with I'm thinking of Fate now, with David Jang, I believe, for Honkai Star, where somebody asked them in an interview whether or not they were concerned that Honkai Star characters were looking too similar. And one of the answers he gave was that, yes, we do realize that that is the case, and that is something that we are looking to fix a little bit in the future. But at the same time, the fact that our characters look so similar to each other is also deliberate. We want to create brand awareness. The fact that all of our characters have these thigh bands might be intentional rather than not. He didn't actually say that, but from what I gathered from the way that he replied to that answer, to that interview question, was what I took away from that. So there are definitely reasons why there are certain character designs in games that work better in games than in actual animes. But this person is also talking about, I think this person is actually responding to a recent reveal for, I forgot what it was called, for Dungeons and Fighters, where I think one of the criticisms for the reveal of that game was that the characters look more similar to Genshin style characters than to the traditional Dungeon Fighter look. But here's the thing, Dungeons & Fighters, I believe, was traditionally a 2D game, right? It was based on 2D sprite graphics, and now it's being transported over to a 3D world. And unfortunately, when you're transforming a franchise from a 2D style to a 3D style, things do get lost in translation. Not Street Fighter, King of Fighters, I think it was called King of Fighters, looks very different going from 2D to 3D. And that is going to be the same for Dungeon Fighters going from 2D to 3D, especially to an open world game. And unfortunately, the benchmark for that is Genshin Impact, right? Wuthering Waves looks very different from Genshin Impact, but even as different as it looks, it still reminds me of Genshin Impact. That's just how it works, because the first open world gacha game, and not even just first open world gacha game, the first open world game that a lot of people have played is just Genshin Impact, because it was free and it was released during COVID. So now every single person who has played those types of games are going to look for something that is relatively similar, relatively familiar, that makes them feel good when they start playing the game, so that they know that how things work immediately, so that they know that, the UI is all the same, so that you can just click on the same places. It is what it is, right? It's unfortunate that that does make games feel more homogenous as time goes on, and I'm sure that there will be future games that are different from Genshin Impact. I think that Zenless Zone Zero actually ran into this problem where they made the UI different from Genshin, whereas Honkai Star made it similar, and I think that put off a lot of people. For me, it didn't, because like Genshin Impact, I'm old enough that Genshin Impact, as good as it was, as big of a part that Genshin Impact was in my life, it's not the first game I have ever played. Maybe it's not even the best game I have ever played, but I think it's competing for that top spot. For better lack of word, like Genshin Impact is just a smaller part of my life than it is for a lot of other people. So the fact that Zenless Zone Zero is relatively different from Genshin does not really bother me. And I do feel like a lot of people ran into that problem with Zenless, with its different like exploration style or non-existent exploration, with its character designs that look relatively different from Genshin Impact. I've noticed that if you scroll down in this tweet thread, a lot of people do not have the same problems with Zenless Zone Zero as they do with like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star, which makes me think that they're talking more about like the Honkai Star and Genshin Impact type of character designs. And Zenless Zone Zero obviously has a different type of that. And I think that has also made some people who like Genshin and Honkai Star character designs not like it as much. I think it was probably Doro or Brand or something that I saw tweet something about their rankings for gacha game character designs, and Zenless Zone Zero for one of them was at the very bottom. And that is totally legitimate. But I do, like, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is that because Zenless Zone Zero's character designs are bad, or is it because it's different? Or even if it's different, that doesn't mean you can't dislike it. It just means that your character preferences are different. So if you like Honkai Star and Genshin character designs, then you're obviously not going to like another form of character design as much if that is your favorite character design. So that's basically all I'm saying. It's just that everybody has different character like preferences. And just the fact that Honkai Star and Genshin Impact have been so big does put a lot of like first mover like bonus towards them. A lot of people are going to be much more familiar with Genshin and Honkai Star character designs. But even then, I don't think it explains why I started liking Genshin Impact character designs more than the other games. I do think there is intrinsically at some level something that is there for Genshin character designs and Hoyoverse character designs that other games don't have. A large part of it definitely has to do with the fact that this is the first like anime style open world 3D gacha game, and because of that, most people are going to think of those character designs first over others. It's not a fair thing to say. It's not a fair like comparison to make with other games. The fact that other future games will always be compared with Genshin Impact is not something that is fair, but it is just a fact of reality. But it's not something bad either. Like at some point, people will get bored of it. And I think Hoyoverse is already moving away from like the Genshin and Honkai Star type of design towards something that is a bit different, like Zenless Zone Zero. Like I said, if you go down the tweet thread, it seems like a lot of people don't have the same problem with the Zenless. If you go down enough, Limbus Company, exactly overloading with details, have you seen Elsword engine? Meanwhile, ZZZ designs are a lot simpler yet better. The only useless and confusing extra detail I've noticed so far is Nicole's belt, since like her belly belt. How is it standing out like that? What is the ring attached to exactly? And what is the thigh belt connected to? So yeah, Zenless Zone Zero is just like, even Nicole's design right now feels a lot simpler. There's not as much going on in her back because the flowy bit is replaced by her hair. If you've noticed, they sometimes if they have flowy hair, they don't need as many belts or ribbons or stuff like that because essentially the hair just replaces that flowy part in the back. Again, it all comes back to, does it actually work in the game? When you look at the character actually moving in the game, does it look good? And if it doesn't look good, then they're going to make the character look good, even if it sacrifices some sort of like individuality that it could have had. Like maybe a character that doesn't have anything flowing on its back would be more individualistic or more different compared to the other characters, but just being different by itself doesn't actually make a character good. It just makes it different. But sometimes also being different might just be enough to make it like more popular. But then again, Zenless Zone Zero did try to be different. It tried to give us a fucking TV mode, and everybody hated it except for me. And now they're removing it. So maybe they understand the audience better than I do. Who knows? Maybe these game companies with myriad amounts of like telemetry data have figured out how we think better than we have. Who knows? So this is Bench Gamer just kind of ranting now. I do feel like it's really surprising how fast like people moved on the Genshin style of character design. Not so much anime, because anime again isn't under the same constraints as games, but definitely the gacha game industry, even the anime game style industry, it does feel like when I was looking at like it was, I don't know what game it was, but there was one gacha game in particular that had the exact same UI as Honkai Star Rail. I forgot the exact name of the game, but now also Dungeon and Fighters, like the MMO gacha. I don't know if it's an MMO, but it's probably a gacha. Also has very similar designs to Genshin Impact, and apparently it didn't before. So we'll see where it goes. At some point, maybe some people will get tired of it, but I don't know. It's not really a big deal to me, and I'm definitely not as incensed as this tweet here. But at the same time, I can definitely see where they're coming from. It's neither a good or bad thing for me. It's just something to be acknowledged that Genshin Impact was so popular that, yeah, gacha games are definitely copying it in more ways than just making a gacha game. They're just making gacha games that are also like Genshin Impact in all forms of ways. Even as Zenless Zone Zero and not Honkai Star, but as Zenless Zone Zero and Hoyoverse, as I've said many times over, are actually moving further away from that form of like character design and game style, then many of these other companies are copying Hoyoverse at the same time that Hoyoverse is moving away from what they were doing before. So anyways, this is Bench Gamer ranting, signing out. I will see you guys later.